Greetings and welcome, I'm Ash, and this is my review and impressions of Black Desert, a combat-focused MMORPG that features a large open world, skill-based fighting system, in-depth crafting, large-scale PvP, and some beautiful visuals to go along with all of that. It is currently in a closed beta state, so take everything I say with a grain of salt, as the big issues are most likely going to be resolved by the time Black Desert launches on March 3rd. As of right now though, Black Desert has some of the most impressive environments I've seen in an MMO, alongside a very well done action-oriented fighting system, but suffers from incredibly easy enemies, generic quests, and atrocious voice acting. I came into Black Desert mostly blind, and the first thing that struck me was how good the character creation system was and how cool you can make all the classes look. In an era where most MMOs seem to be giving you either ridiculous clothes or no clothes at all, I was quite shocked when I realized that the armor sets in Black Desert are not only somewhat realistic, but also incredibly badass. The one I ended up rolling came from the cash shop, more on that later, and looked very similar to the Elite Knight set from Dark Souls, which is my favorite armor set, so as far as style goes, I'm quite happy with what Black Desert has to offer. My only worry is that the cash shop might contain all of the good sets, given that everything I've encountered in-game was a bunch of generic rags with bits of plate stuck to them. But I'd imagine the gear gets more visually interesting once you reach the late game, so I won't dwell too much on this. As I mentioned before, the character creation system goes above and beyond what you usually see in MMOs by allowing you to edit almost every single feature of your character down to individual parts of their body. I prefer to cover myself in armor, so I didn't spend too long fiddling with the character creator, but I did manage to make my knight look like Prince Charming, the douchiest man in all the lands with a constant shit-eating grin on his face. I don't know why I decided to do that, but given how many times he almost brought me to tears from laughter, I would say that it was definitely worth it. After going to character creation and realizing how amazing Prince Douchebag turned out, I opted to use the free €60 worth of cash store currency and get myself some fancy armor. This is where my happiness quickly drained away as I realized a single armor set costs over €30. €30! You can buy another copy of Black Desert and have enough money left over that you can grab yourself a drink and hopefully forget how much you just spent on a single costume. When I finally burned through my €60 worth of cash shop currency, I ended up with one armor set, one pet I need to feed, and a set of horse armor. How anyone could think this is good value for their money is beyond me, and I truly do hope these prices are simply placeholders for the beta, because otherwise I see a very dark future for Black Desert. On the bright side, I didn't see any pay-to-win items in the cash store. The worst offenders are probably the XP boosters and small benefits you gain from purchasing some armor sets, but in general it's not a big deal, and I can confidently say that you can fully ignore the cash shop and still have a good time. If you do decide to spend some money, I would recommend you go for the non-combat pets, which help you out by automatically looting enemy items, thus allowing you to be as lazy as possible. There is also the extra benefit of you looking really fancy with a giant falcon perched on your shoulder or a small kitten napping between your legs. While on the topic of loot, it's probably a good time to discuss the process of making it appear, i.e. the slicing and dicing of enemies. Black Desert is a very combat-focused game, so I'm glad I'm able to tell you that the fighting system feels great. All of my sword swings felt impactful and sent enemies recoiling back due to the sheer force of the blow, though I did have to reduce the graphical effects a bit, as my sword for some reason was just way too flashy and way too bright. My abilities were diverse and well balanced between offensive and defensive options, so I spent the majority of my time in battle dancing around enemies, constantly blocking, striking, backstabbing, and grabbing imps by their throat in order to throw them at other imps. If you haven't guessed already, I had a great deal of fun with the combat in Black Desert, but a few things kept me from truly becoming immersed in all the fighting. Most notably the overpopulated zones, stupidly easy enemies, and a completely uninspired questing system. The first issue will most likely resolve itself once Black Desert officially launches and more servers become available, but in the current beta there's about 20 people per each enemy, and since for some reason you don't share credit, you're going to end up hating your fellow man more than the imps you're hunting, which is just bad design. The second problem is that the enemies are ridiculously easy, to the point that I had to go fight creatures 5+ levels higher than me in order to find even a bit of challenge and a reason to use the 20 or so potential combo strikes I can pull off. The only appropriately leveled enemies I enjoyed fighting were the mini-bosses the game uses to teach you how to party up with other players. If you simply ignore that and go solo, you will find that Black Desert's skill-based combat system works really well, which then begs the question of why the developers are so afraid to make the players use it. The final issue as far as combat is concerned is the fact that the questing system is even worse than the one found in Vanilla WoW, a game that is over a decade old at this point. Every single quest I've done has been a variation of kill X, press R an object, or talk to Guy, with seemingly no hope of anything more complex coming up in the later levels. Black Desert seems like the perfect type of a game to add dynamic quests and a truly living world, but unfortunately there is nothing of the sort and you're just running between enemies that patrol 2-meter long routes. And if the generic quests weren't enough, the voice acting is terrible and the writing uninspired as well as confusing. I am one of those crazy people that actually read the dialogue and quest text in MMOs, but doing so in Black Desert was just pointless, because the quests were either completely banal or filled with so many names or confusing terms you would somehow leave the conversation knowing less than you did before. It also doesn't help that for some reason asking NPCs about the lore expends your precious energy points which you use for crafting, so not only does the game do a poor job of explaining the lore to you, it punishes you for even trying. Add to that voice acting that ranges from completely emotionless to I'm putting on a fake accent because I'm the hilarious character to I'm a gravity boost man, so I'm totally serious and angry. And you've got a game where I fully recommend you mash the skip button through every single bit of dialogue in order to get back to the parts Black Desert does well, the combat and the crafting. In a complete contrast to the questing system, the crafting in Black Desert is seemingly infinitely complex, with thousands of recipes, items, and methods of preparation. For example, the fish you can catch by using, you guessed it, fishing, has a certain amount of time during which it is considered as fresh. So what you can do is either eat it raw like some sort of animal, cook it over a fire, or even lay it out in the sun to dry for a while in order to package it and thus extend its duration. This is just a small example. There are even more methods of preparing, pickling, or otherwise messing around with fish that I haven't even had the chance to try out yet. Needless to say, there are many more professions beside fishing, and the same applies to them. It is a really nifty system. But if you're like me and you're too lazy to bother with crafting, you could always buy a house and then hire some workers to do the crafting for you. Or simply use the house yourself and decorate it to your liking with a frankly silly amount of furniture you can either buy, craft, or find. I'm not the type of person that's interested in this, so I didn't spend too much time hunting down chairs, but I'm very glad the option is there for both parties, the role players and the ruthlessly efficient types. As a final note, I wanted to talk about PvP in Black Desert, but unfortunately I haven't managed to get into a single scrap. I've encountered no open world battles, the one guild versus guild battle I joined was over before it began and the arena system wouldn't let me in, so I'm afraid I don't have much to offer to you on this front. What I can say is that if the balance is even remotely good, the battles must be quite the spectacle with both parties dashing, slashing and dodging all over the place. Black Desert is going to be a very divisive game, given that the focus is almost entirely on combat, crafting and PvP to the detriment of everything else. But to its credit, the combat really does feel great and I could easily see myself spending a good amount of time with it, provided the enemies become less of a pushover later in the game. Similarly, I can see great potential in the crafting system, as it is very rewarding to go through an elaborate recipe in order to obtain a cool piece of gear, provided the market doesn't make the crafting professions a net loss. Whether to recommend Black Desert or not is a bit of a tricky question given the cash shop situation. What I would advise you right now is to wait and see if the absurd shop prices change in the near future, because for a game that costs €30 it shouldn't behave like a very bad example of a free-to-play game. If the prices do change and you're someone that enjoys PvP and relentless combat, then Black Desert might be the game for you. It certainly is fun, although flawed. Thank you guys for listening, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please let me know, and if you'd like to see more, you can either subscribe here or check out the website linked down below. That one tends to be updated more frequently. With all of that said, I hope you guys have a nice day, and I will see you soon. See ya!